We're now joined by Dr. Diane Wong, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Rutgers University, Newark. Good to see you, Professor.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about anti-Asian violence or violence directed toward the Asian American community. And I also want to say this is part of a series. You'll see the graphic called Confronting Racism. This Confronting Racism series we're doing in cooperation with our colleagues at Rutgers, Newark. Let me ask you, Professor, the incidence of violence and discrimination against the Asian American community has risen dramatically. First of all, how dramatically? Second of all, some of the primary reasons for that, please.
Of course. Well, since the start of the pandemic, as you mentioned, there's been an alarming increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans. This increase can largely be attributed to the harmful and xenophobic language used by some media and politicians like former President Trump to wrongfully blame and associate Asians with the pandemic, right? According to data collected by Stop AAPI Hate, which is a self-reporting online tool that documents harassment, almost 11,500 incidents of anti-Asian discrimination were self-reported across the country from March of 2020 to this year. And the majority of these instances involve verbal harassment and physical assault in public spaces. And keep in mind that this data does not account for microaggressions, which are more subtle forms of discrimination against Asian Americans that happen in a variety of spaces, including the workplace, that often go unnoticed and unreported.
Why are women more likely to be assaulted, attacked, discriminated against than men?
Right. So this is really important to emphasize. Right. I think the data right now shows that women are disproportionately impacted by anti-Asian violence and represent over 70% of incidents reported. Right. This is a staggering, significant increase. And so if you recall last year in March, a man drove to 3 different massage parlors in Atlanta and deliberately shot and killed 8 people, including 6 Asian American women. And so a lot of this accounts for how Asian American women in particular are over fetishized and sexualized by the media and in conversations around Asian women as seen as stereotypically docile. And so as a result of all of this, and in particular Asian American women, they continue to experience more physical assaults and fear for personal safety. I think questions around the intertwined effects of racism, violence, and health outcomes demand a much more scholarly research and media attention overall.
So you made mention, and I'm no fan of, and it's not an opinion, well, I guess it is an opinion, blaming virtually everything that's wrong in our society on former President Trump. However, we need to be clear. We're not editorializing, we're not editing. The president, former president, on many occasions, called COVID-19, quote, the China flu, emphasizing the China flu. From your research, what do you believe the correlation, the connection is between the president of the United States, the leader of the free world at the time, referring to the China flu and the discrimination and violence that you're referring to right now against the Asian American community?
I think the effects of that kind of xenophobic language are really harmful. And I think a lot of Americans who listen to this kind of language, the China virus, Kung flu, are sort of internalize the correlation of the coronavirus with Asians. And I think that uptick, especially as we saw in the spring of 2020, was directly correlated to this kind of increase in language. And so I think it shows in many ways sort of the effect of this kind of trickle-down language when it comes to what politicians and former President Trump used in their everyday rhetoric to what happens interpersonally on an everyday level. But I do want to emphasize this kind of anti-Asian violence and rhetoric is not new, right, or unprecedented. It's actually can be contextualized in a much longer history of anti-Asian violence and exclusion within the United States.
But I want to follow up on something. You've argued that white people are the main perpetrators of anti-Asian racism. And then you said white supremacy does not require that a white person perpetuate it. I'm confused by that because there are history, Crown Heights and other communities, where it is in fact African Americans who are involved in perpetrating violence against the Asian community, and conflict between the African American community and the Asian community. Respectfully, how is that white supremacy?
So I think that this is something that's really important. And, what the data has indicated is that vast majorities of hate incidents that are self-reported have actually been perpetuated by non-Black people, right? And I think when it comes to these sort of more heightened incidents that are often picked up by the media and are circulated online, right? A lot of the perpetrators are unfortunately Black, and I think this sort of increases narratives around Black and Asian tension, when I think it also masks the important histories that Black and Asian Americans have when it comes to building in political solidarity and longer histories of working in alignment, right, as opposed to this kind of tension that is only focused on often by the media.
Respectfully, Professor, why can't both be true? Why can't it be true that disproportionately whites in power, governmental policies connected to World War II, the internment camps, and the discrimination, institutional discrimination perpetuated by white politicians in power, and that has existed for a long time. But there's also a problem or issues involving the African American community and the Asian American community. Why can't both be true?
I think so. What this moment around anti-Asian violence has revealed is the need to look for root causes and interconnections, right? What are the reasons in which we're seeing this uptick in anti-Asian violence, as well as these kinds of incidents that you're talking about, right? I think it very much so needs to be contextualized within larger state-sanctioned policies, right? And so often when we talk about anti-Asian violence, it begins with the 1882 Exclusion Act, which was introduced, right, as a xenophobic effort to curtail the migration of Chinese people to the United States, and moves through decades of exclusionary top-down laws, policies, and practices used to justify war violence abroad in the Philippines, Laos, and Cambodia. But there was also, as you mentioned, the incarceration of more than 120,000 Japanese Americans across the country during World War II.
Led by then President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So go ahead.
Absolutely. And the truth is that a lot of people don't know about this history, right? And I think it's really important to contextualize this present moment within these longer histories to illuminate sort of the ebb and flow of anti-Asian violence in response to domestic and global shifts. And I think when we look at history, especially in the 1960s and 70s, we do see a lot of parallel organizing between Black and Asian communities around the same systems of oppression and discrimination that affects both communities, right? And we still see this organizing today in the present day.
Professor, cannot thank you enough for joining us. Complex, I appreciate the term contextualize, but the other thing is how complex this is. But I promise you this will not be the last time we visit with you and get your perspective on these issues, and other leaders and academic scholars in the community that are particularly concerned about discrimination, racism, institutional and otherwise, against the Asian American community. Professor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Steve. See you next time.
You got it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by Valley Bank, the New Jersey Education Association, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, Community Food Bank of New Jersey, Hackensack Meridian Health, New Jersey Sharing Network, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and by Johnson & Johnson. Promotional support provided by Insider NJ, and by NorthJersey.com and Local IQ, part of the USA Today network.
I'm Tim Sullivan, CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. Since joining the NJEDA, I've been struck by the incredible assets and resources that New Jersey has to offer. The NJEDA is working every day to grow New Jersey's economy in a way that maximizes the values of those assets to benefit every single New Jersey resident. This includes more support for small businesses and a focus on reclaiming New Jersey's position as a leader in the innovation economy. Visit njeda.com to learn more about how NJEDA is building a stronger and fairer New Jersey economy.